In 1938, Errol Flynn was the highest-paid actor in Hollywood. He played Robin Hood, he played war heroes, he played pirates who swung from ropes and rescued damsels and always won the sword fight. Women threw themselves at him. Studios built entire franchises around his jawline. Warner Brothers once insured his face for $1 million. And then he died at 50 years old in a rented apartment in Vancouver with a 17-year-old girl sitting next to him. When the coroner cut him open, he found the body of a 75-year-old man. Coronary thrombosis, cirrhosis of the liver, a colon riddled with damage, a blood alcohol level more than 3 times the legal limit. Between the fame and the autopsy table, there was a statutory trial, a house full of hidden cameras, allegations of Nazi espionage, and a pattern with teenage girls that followed him all the way to the grave. This is the real story of Errol Flynn. Errol Leslie Thompson Flynn was born on June 20, 1909 in Battery Point, Tasmania, which at the time was one of the most remote corners of the British Empire. His father, Theodore, was a respected marine biologist and zoology professor at the University of Tasmania. His mother, Morel, came from a seafaring family. By all accounts, their marriage was miserable. Flynn later described his mother as abusive in his autobiography. He recalled a beating at 7 years old that nearly drove him to run away from home for good. She reportedly called him a devil in boy's clothing. And given what would follow, she may not have been entirely wrong. Flynn was expelled from nearly every school he attended. His final expulsion from the exclusive Shore School in Sydney came for fighting and, by his own admission, for alleged misconduct with the daughter of the school laundress. He was 17 years old. With no education left to ruin, Flynn did something that would shape every wild chapter of his life to come. He boarded a ship and sailed to Papua New Guinea. Over the next 5 years, he worked as a plantation overseer, a gold miner, a boat captain, a pearl diver, a bird trapper, and, according to some accounts, a diamond smuggler. He caught malaria multiple times. He got into fistfights with other colonists. He traveled with a young Austrian doctor named Hermann Erben, who would later become a confirmed Nazi intelligence operative. But that part of the story comes later. By 1933, Flynn was 24 and had burned through every opportunity the South Pacific could offer him. An Australian film producer named Charles Chauvel came across photographs of Flynn and offered him the lead role in a low-budget semi-documentary called In the Wake of the Bounty. He played Fletcher Christian, the famous mutineer. It was not a good film, but Flynn realized something on set that would change his life. He was better at pretending to be an adventurer on camera than he was at actually being one. He sailed for London, joined a repertory theater company, and within 2 years caught the attention of Warner Brothers. They brought him to Hollywood, and Hollywood had no idea what it was getting. The Rise. In 1935, Warner Brothers needed someone to star in Captain Blood, an expensive pirate adventure film. The original lead, Robert Donat, had dropped out. The studio was desperate. They took a gamble on the unknown Australian with the good jawline and the reckless grin. Captain Blood became one of the biggest hits of the year, and just like that, Errol Flynn was a star. Not a rising talent, not a promising newcomer, an overnight sensation at 26 years old. What followed was one of the most dominant runs in Hollywood history. The Charge of the Light Brigade in 1936. The Adventures of Robin Hood in 1938, which remains one of the most iconic adventure films ever made. The Seahawk in 1940. They Died with Their Boots On in 1941. Flynn starred alongside Olivia de Havilland in 8 films, and the two shared a chemistry so intense that de Havilland later admitted they had fallen in love. In a 2009 interview, she said the relationship was never consummated because Flynn was already married. Chemistry was there, though, she said. It was there. When the United States entered World War II, Flynn applied for citizenship and immediately tried to enlist. He was rejected on medical grounds: the tuberculosis, the weak heart, the chronic back injuries, the recurring bouts of malaria from New Guinea. The military said no. Warner Brothers, terrified that audiences would lose faith in their action hero, refused to publicize the reason. So Flynn spent the war playing soldiers on screen while classified 4F in real life. That gap between the image and the man would only grow wider. And that gap starts with his marriage. In 1935, Flynn had married Lily Demita, a French actress who was already a major star. The relationship was volatile from the start. They fought constantly. Flynn was unfaithful almost immediately. But Demita gave him a son in 1941, a boy named Sean, who would grow up to live a life almost as tragic as his father's. At the peak of his fame, Flynn bought 11 acres on Mulholland Drive and built what he officially called Mulholland Farm. Privately, he called it his playhouse. The estate had a pool, a tennis court, a barn, and a casino. His parties became legendary. Live bands, nude divers, fencing exhibitions, and Hollywood's biggest names walking through the door at all hours. But Mulholland Farm had a secret that most of those guests never knew about. Flynn had the house built with hidden passageways, peepholes drilled into walls, and two-way mirrors installed in the bathrooms. He built a crawl space above one of the guest bedrooms that gave him a full, unobstructed view of the bed below. He also installed microphones wired to his private den so he and his inner circle could listen to women talking about them without being detected. This was not a secret that surfaced decades later. It was an open secret in Hollywood at the time. Guests knew, friends knew. Actor Bruce Cabot discovered the two-way mirror setup during a stay and was furious. But the anger never lasted long because Flynn's charm had a way of making people forgive things they probably shouldn't have. And then in 1942, the charm ran out. The controversies. Layer 1. The trial. In late 1942, Errol Flynn was charged with 3 counts of statutory. The accusers were 2 teenage girls. Betty Hansen was 17. Peggy Satterlee was 15. Hansen alleged that Flynn had given her cocktails at a party in Bel Air and then taken her upstairs and seduced her. She had turned 17 just 6 days earlier. The age of consent in California was 18. Satterlee's allegations were even more disturbing. She claimed that in August of 1941, Flynn had invited her onto his yacht, the Sirocco, for a weekend cruise near Catalina Island. She later testified that he attacked her on the boat in ways she described as so violent she feared he would kill her. The trial opened on January 11, 1943, and it became the biggest celebrity court case America had ever seen. Flynn was 33. He was at the peak of his career. He was playing a heroic Australian Air Force pilot alongside Ronald Reagan in Desperate Journey while simultaneously sitting in a Los Angeles courtroom accused of assaulting 2 teenagers. Flynn hired Jerry Giesler, the highest-profile defense attorney in Hollywood, a man whose client list already included Charlie Chaplin and Busby Berkeley. Giesler's strategy was as old as the courtroom itself. He attacked the credibility of the accusers. He dredged up details about their personal lives, including past relationships and medical histories, and put them on full display in front of a packed courtroom and a national press corps. After 21 days of testimony, a jury of 9 women and 3 men deliberated for 13 hours before returning their verdict. Not guilty on all 3 counts. Peggy Satterlee later said she knew how the trial would end the moment she saw the jury. "I knew those women would acquit him," she told reporters. "They just sat and looked adoringly at him as if he was their son or something." The acquittal gave America a new phrase. "In like Flynn" entered the language almost overnight, a slang term for guaranteed success, particularly with women. Flynn wanted to call his autobiography In Like Me. His publisher talked him out of it. But the trial revealed something else about Flynn that was harder to laugh off. While the case was in session during a break in the proceedings, Flynn noticed a young woman working at a snack bar inside the courthouse. Her name was Nora Eddington. She was 19 years old. Her father was a captain in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Flynn began pursuing her while he was literally on trial for statutory rape. Within a year, Nora was pregnant. They married in 1943. She became his second wife. But this pattern was not even close to the worst of what would surface about Errol Flynn. Layer 2. The spy. While Flynn's characters stormed beaches and shot down enemy planes on screen, The real Flynn was confined to Hollywood with a 4F classification. But according to a controversial 1980 biography by author Charles Hyam, Flynn was not just sitting out the war. Hyam alleged that Flynn was an active Nazi sympathizer who had been recruited by his old friend from New Guinea, the Austrian doctor Hermann Erben. Erben was not a rumor. He was a confirmed Nazi intelligence agent who admitted after the war to serving in German military intelligence from 1941 to 1945. Hyam claimed that Flynn and Erben traveled to Spain together during the Spanish Civil War in 1937 and fed information about German socialists to the Gestapo. He alleged that FBI files and declassified State Department documents implicated Flynn in espionage activities. Now, this requires context. Multiple biographers, including Tony Thomas in Errol Flynn, the spy who never was, have denounced Hyam's claims as fabricated or wildly exaggerated. Flynn's own stunt double, Buster Wiles, accused Hyam of falsifying source material. The allegations remain unproven, and Flynn was never charged with anything related to espionage. But there is a documented letter released by the CIA in which Flynn wrote to Erben about a slimy Jew who was trying to cheat me. Franklin Roosevelt Jr. reportedly confirmed Flynn's anti-Semitic remarks in private, recalling that his social circle would call Flynn Flynnberg specifically to provoke him. Whether Flynn was a genuine agent or simply a reckless man who kept terrible company, the association with a confirmed Nazi spy added another shadow to a reputation that was already fracturing. And then came the relationship that would define the final years of his life. Layer 3. Beverly. By the mid-1950s, Flynn's career was effectively over. Warner Brothers had terminated his contract in 1950. He was 41 years old, twice divorced, buried in alimony payments, and drinking an estimated 2 liters of vodka a day. When studios banned him from drinking on set, he would inject oranges with vodka and eat them during breaks. He had also become addicted to opium. According to biographers, Flynn told his second wife he wanted to experience everything in life before beginning to dabble with the drug in the late 1940s. The dabbling became a full dependency. Between the alcohol and the opium, his body was deteriorating at a pace that even his closest friends found alarming. He developed serious liver problems by his mid-40s. His face, once the most insured in Hollywood, grew puffy and unrecognizable. He tried to produce his own film, The Story of William Tell, using his remaining savings. The production collapsed mid-shoot. It left him financially ruined. It was during this freefall that Flynn met Beverly Adland. She was 15 years old. He was 47. According to Beverly's mother, Florence, who later wrote about the relationship in a book called The Big Love, Flynn began a romantic relationship with her daughter when Beverly was 15. Flynn openly referred to Adland as his girlfriend. They traveled together. They appeared in public together. He cast her in what would become his final film, Cuban Rebel Girls, a low-budget production about Fidel Castro's revolution that Flynn himself wrote and narrated. Flynn was still legally married to his third wife, actress Patrice Wymore. They were estranged, but he had never filed for divorce. Reports indicate he sought a divorce in 1958 specifically so he could marry Adland. Wymore did not grant it. She would instead become his widow. The death. In October of 1959, Flynn traveled to Vancouver, Canada, to sell his beloved yacht, the Zaka. Beverly Adland, now 17, was with him. They were staying with a local physician named Dr. Grant Gould. Those who encountered Flynn in Vancouver in those final days were shocked by his appearance. The man who had once been called the most handsome actor in Hollywood was bloated, disheveled, and visibly unwell. He was 50 years old but looked decades older. On the evening of October 14th, Flynn collapsed. Beverly was beside him. He suffered a massive heart attack and died before medical help could arrive. He was 50 years old. The autopsy that followed told the story that Flynn's screen roles never could. The coroner's report listed coronary thrombosis as the cause of death, but the underlying damage was staggering. Fatty degeneration of the liver. Portal cirrhosis so advanced that even if he had survived the heart attack, it would have killed him within a year. diverticulosis of the colon, a blood alcohol level of 0.25%. His body showed the cumulative destruction of decades of alcohol and opium abuse. The coroner reportedly remarked that he had the body of a 75-year-old man. The media coverage that followed was vicious, but not toward Flynn. It was aimed at Beverly Adland. Newspapers recast the 17-year-old as the villain of a tabloid morality play. She became Flynn's teenage lover, the scandalous girl beside the dying legend. The fact that she was a child who had been brought into this relationship at 15 by a man in his late 40s was treated as a footnote. Flynn was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, a place he had once said he hated. He had wanted to be buried on his estate in Jamaica. His estranged wife, Patrice Wymore, overruled him. According to director Vincent Sherman, Flynn would have hated every moment of the Hollywood funeral. The aftermath. Flynn left behind 4 children from 3 marriages. His autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, was published shortly after his death. He had titled it after the phrase everyone already used to describe him. True to form, the book mixed genuine confession with tall tales and manufactured mythology. The John Barrymore body-snatching story, in which Flynn claimed his friend stole the dead actor's corpse from a morgue and propped it up in his living room as a prank, first appeared in those pages. Historians have debated the truth of that story ever since, with Barrymore's own biographer calling it a fabrication that Flynn invented to give his dead idol one more outrageous scene. But the most devastating chapter of the Flynn legacy had not been written yet. Flynn's son Sean grew up largely raised by his mother, Lily Demita. He tried acting for a few years but found it unfulfilling. Instead, he picked up a camera and became a freelance photojournalist covering the Vietnam War. His work was published in Time magazine and newspapers around the world. Those who knew him said he had his father's recklessness. On April 6, 1970, Sean Flynn and fellow journalist Dana Stone rode motorcycles toward a Viet Cong checkpoint on Highway 1 in Cambodia. They were 28 and 24 years old. Neither man was ever seen again. They are believed to have been captured and executed by the Khmer Rouge. Sean was declared legally dead in 1984. Errol Flynn lived 50 years. In that time, he was the biggest movie star in the world, a defendant in one of the most infamous trials of the 20th century, and a man whose private life was so destructive that it consumed everyone who came near him. The phrase, "in like Flynn," outlived him. The scandals outlived him. The questions about who he really was beneath the charm and the swordplay and the vodka have never been fully answered. His son disappeared into the jungle looking for a story worth telling. His teenage girlfriend spent decades defined by his name. His body gave out 25 years before it should have. If you're finding this story as disturbing as I did, you might want to check out the video on screen right now about what really went on behind the scenes during the golden age of Hollywood. Because Flynn was not the only one. And the house on Mulholland Drive, with its 2-way mirrors and hidden passageways, was eventually torn down and divided into 7 separate lots. Singer Ricky Nelson owned it for a while and claimed the place was haunted. His daughter Tracy said she could feel a presence in the house when she was alone. The peepholes are gone, but the stories they enabled are not.